Hey everyone, welcome to a brand new episode 23 of No Restraints with Rudy Caceres. Thank you all for people that have made this a success. I love doing this. Out of all the Facebook Lives I do, these are always my favorite because it's my baby. Fridays, 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. I have a different mental health advocate. And I'm going to have a great one on today. Her name is Keely Carney, and she is the creator and owner of Mental Health Mugs. And if you want to buy one of these, we will have the links below. Not this, because I'm special. Only I get this one. And so if you have any questions, comments for Keely, don't ask me anything because I'm a loser. I don't know anything. If you have any questions for her, whether it's about the mugs or about depression, about recovery, please. She is the person, especially if you're watching this live. We love the live interaction. If you're watching this later on the day, later on the week, that's totally cool as well. Still feel free to ask questions. I will get back to you. Keely will get back to you as well. Here we go. Hey, Sally Spencer Thomas, how are you? And hey, Shirley Evans, a new fan. Thank you. Thank you for checking us out. Feel free to share. Without further ado, I'm going to bring on Keely Carney. I'm going to ask her the question, the $1 million question. So, without further ado, tell the whole world, the whole universe watching No Restraints with Rudy Caceres, who is Keely Carney.
Hi, Rudy, and everyone who's tuning in. So excited to be in front of Rudy's audience and have this connection. I think everything that you do is so incredible. So I am Keely Carney, and I spend a lot of my time right now working on these things right here. They're called mental health mugs. The one that I have says Mental Health Matters. A really popular one is that Mental Health Advocate one. And basically, I am really dedicated to using my life's energy to starting a more positive conversation around mental health. So I have this view that a lot of us who have struggled, and I have definitely struggled in my lifetime. You already mentioned some of the depression. I'm a recovering alcoholic. I've struggled with some body image stuff, a lot of the mental and emotional stuff. I really think that a lot of what helps us get well is developing an empowered perspective of saying we're not so much victims of our circumstances. We're these people who have this opportunity to make a change. And then people like you, Rudy, can bring those voices out and talk to people about it and make it so that nobody has to suffer alone. Because this really is something where it can be an opportunity. There can be a more positive conversation about it. And I truly believe that we have the opportunity to eliminate stigma in our lifetime if we all just put a little bit of effort in.
Awesome. Now I want to ask more questions, but I just want to take a slow sip. And we had a question. And no, Cheryl Boswell, I didn't think of putting mental health advocate on the mug, but I had the idea for the black one. So this is not available. This is just for me because I'm special.
You are very special.
But thank you. I appreciate you, Cheryl, for joining us poolside. And before we talk about the mugs, I want to talk more about your backstory because obviously you had to have had something happen in your life where now you're creating mental health mugs. So talk about your life story. Feel free to take as much time as you want to the point where you got to mental health mugs.
I think it started the same way it did for a lot of us. I was just growing up, I just felt different than, less than, all of those different things. I was wildly uncomfortable in my skin in this world for a very long time. I ended up descending into the dark hole of addiction at a pretty young age. And it was all in response to all this suffering that I felt. I never felt comfortable no matter what. And I remember when I did land in treatment when I was 22. I got sober when I was 22. And I just remember one of the first assignments that I had, I talked about how I just felt like I was an alien who was dropped off on the wrong planet. I just didn't feel like I belonged here, that I wasn't comfortable being a human at all. And I've learned through this community that I've become connected with that so many of us feel that way. And that's why this whole philosophy is around starting a more positive conversation where we can just tell the truth. I see a comment. Sorry, I got distracted.
That's cool.
So a lot of my story really starts with when I got sober. Because when you get sober, you enter this community where people take action on a daily basis to stay well. It's a really, really strong, motivated, and inspiring recovery community. And what had happened was after I got sober, I still struggled a lot with depression. And I had the chronic kind of low grade, high functioning depression. I still was able to go to work. I was still able to, be a functional human. I just didn't get any enjoyment out of life. I really felt like most of life was a chore. I didn't have the energy that it took. There was the effort and reward ratio was off. And eventually I worked with this really, really incredible doctor who helped me see that I could apply a lot of the same principles that I'd used in my recovery from alcoholism to my recovery from depression, that I could take actions on a daily basis to change my story. And so I built a career up in marketing. So I'd worked for hotels doing their digital marketing. I had the opportunity to go work in Chiang Mai, Thailand, doing digital marketing for a startup there. And I actually ended up doing a pretty major career shift where I switched and I went back to working in a substance abuse treatment center. And from there, I ended up being a recovery coach and sober companion. And it really just cemented this idea that so many of us are suffering. We can become empowered advocates for ourselves and we can take these actions. And so the idea for the mugs came about when I was working in that capacity as the recovery coach and the sober companion. And it actually came about right in the middle of a recovery meeting. I was mid-recovery meeting and it was, I don't know, I call it a Harry Potter-esque moment because J.K. Rowling tells the story about how she was on a train and 1 minute there was not the idea for Harry Potter, and the next minute there was, and it's just the whole idea was instantly downloaded into my brain. And I came home and I started working on it. I started very simply just setting up a website. I think I had 3 sayings on the mugs. I had mental health matters, I had progress, not perfection, and I had begin. And just started going through Instagram. And I had been doing some things on the side around that. I was actually really interested in developing some sort of digital depression recovery program. So I had been already introduced to this really, really strong mental health advocacy community on Instagram. So I had found my footing there. And it's really just become this wild journey from there. With the mugs, the 9th one that I sold had this message on it. It was one of these mental health matters one, but it was the green one. I remember that specifically. And this woman, Beth, she's this incredible mental health advocate from North Carolina. She's doing amazing things. She had ordered one of these mugs and she'd taken it to work. And while she was in a meeting, someone said, "Hey, what's your mug about? Like, why are you in this office? Why are you here with a mental health matters mug?" And she got this opportunity to reintroduce herself to her coworkers as a mental health advocate and a suicide survivor. And she told her whole story, which she does publicly. She's wonderful. But what happened immediately afterwards was this woman came up to her and said, "Hey, I have a friend who's struggling and she's suicidal and I don't know how to help her." And Beth helped get resources to that woman. So that's where this whole thing pivoted. This whole thing became about starting a conversation. Because I'm entirely honest, my original idea for the mugs was encouragement and support. Throughout the entire length of my struggles, not a single day passed where I didn't have a cup of coffee or tea. And there's something very inherently comforting to me about holding on to a mug. So I thought the mugs would be something where people could start their day with a positive reminder or some sort of that thing. But it really became about the conversation, which is how I got introduced to this world and to you and all of that, where it's people speaking up and making it so that we don't have to live in shame or hide in the dark or do any of those different things. We can say, "Hey, this is my story. I struggled with addiction. I struggled with depression. My story changed, and now I can talk about it in the hopes that someone else will hear something that resonates with them and that it will empower them to change their own life."
I mean, there's something about these mugs just makes you want to just curl up, have a little chat, and through the magic of Facebook and Instagram as well. We did an Instagram live earlier, which you can check out on the Mental Health Mugs account on Instagram. It just makes you want to just chat with people.
Yeah, a lot of the most important conversations in my life have happened over a cup of coffee because alcohol was my drug of choice. So so many pivotal moments in early recovery happen over a cup of coffee because that's what we do. We stop going to bars, we stop drinking, but we still go out for coffee all the time. That's our new thing that we do. And I don't even think that I really had a personality before I got sober. I was just kind of a shell of a human who was a chameleon who changed to be whoever I needed to be in the circumstance. And you start to rediscover yourself over these sometimes super awkward conversations over coffee because you don't have social skills yet. And then it becomes the thing that you do. You look forward to those moments in coffee shops with your friends.
Or on Facebook.
Or on Facebook.
Now, let me ask you a question. Before I get to that, I just want to give some more shout outs. Thank you for the support, Tabitha. And Shirley gets it. She gets what we're talking about. She also says you're amazing. So if you're watching this live, thank you. Hello. Hello. This is No Restraints with Rudy Caceres, episode 23. I'm talking with Keely Carney. She's an overall amazing person, but she's also the founder, creator, owner of Mental Health Mugs, which I have 2 of right now. And we will give you the link down below in the comments. But if you want to just say the link right now, feel free, Keely Carney.
It's a pretty easy one. You just go to mentalhealthmugs.com. I do a lot of our mental health advocacy work on Instagram. So it's the same thing. The handle is Mental Health Mugs. So if you just look for those, you'll be able to find it.
Great. So something I'm interested in, as you know, you don't need me to tell you that alcohol is a depressant, but I do want to know, did you start drinking because you were depressed, or was it the drinking that made you depressed?
I identify with the former. So I think that the depression started before the alcoholism in my case, because what alcohol did for me was it gave me the sense of ease that I had never had before. So it gave me this ability to exist in this world and to feel comfortable and to be able to be around people and to do all those different things, because there was just some sort of glitch in my programming where for some reason I wasn't able to find much joy in this world. And then depression and then alcohol, we call alcohol a spirit for a reason. Alcohol made me spirited. And I loved that. And I think that's why the depression came back so bad after the alcoholism, because there was already that original baseline of like, I was drinking to treat the depression. And then there was also this grieving period of losing this thing that made me feel so good. Because, you learn about this in recovery. People don't drink because of the alcohol. They drink because of how it makes them feel. And there was something magical about how alcohol made me feel that I had to learn how to feel without it. But it was definitely, yeah. And it goes without saying, obviously, that I was making very short-sighted decisions, because it is such a depressant that I think it made my journey through depression a lot more tedious than it needed to be if I hadn't turned to alcohol.
Now, it's so cliche that we drink alcohol to drown our sorrows. And something I learned last week by talking with Shane Schultz is that we're not always able to pinpoint exactly why we have post-traumatic stress. And so I wanted to ask you, are you able to pinpoint it? What exactly just set off the depression in the first place?
No, I don't. I really subscribe to the stress vulnerability theory of mental illness. So this idea that there's this tipping point where we all have this set point, and it's based on our genetics, it's based on the nurture we received in our early childhood, it's based on our childhood adverse events, it's based on our personality, it's based on whatever combination of nature and nurture we ended up with sets this point where here's my stress level. Here is the stress that I can handle. And then, so that's basically our vulnerability. And then my stress level just happened to exceed my vulnerability. So there are some people who could have this potential for depression. This theory's even been applied to some things like schizophrenia. Like, it's pretty all encompassing. This idea that it's really just a tipping point. So the solution becomes you either build your resilience to increase your to change your vulnerability set point, or you reduce your stress. And a lot of what I work on is doing both. So if you end up following the Mental Health Mugs account, what you'll see is a lot of what we share are tips for building resilience and building routines around these coffee mugs, because I think that we all have the power to change these things.
Yeah, and I definitely think people have different tipping points. I know some people, they're able to jump out of airplanes, because I was in the military, be able to go to war, and not all of them get PTSD. Some of them are able to live that life, and that's their life. And where others, like me, I didn't even go to war, and yet I was hospitalized for a mental breakdown. So I think it's important to build that resilience. We don't teach enough resilience early on in the youth. There's a lot of talk about mental health education, but I think it should go way beyond learning about different diagnoses. It should be about resilience. It should be about how to deal with childhood trauma, which doesn't always like I had mentioned, different people have different tipping points. So different people can be traumatized by things where someone who has a different tipping point might think, well, that's not too bad. You didn't have it so hard. But different people, different tipping points. Therefore, different people can get traumatized by different things. That doesn't mean that they're weak. Some of the strongest people I know, some of the most badass people I know, they have to have service dogs because of their PTSD. So it just goes to show it's not a matter of being macho or anything like that. It's just the way our bodies are made. But like you had said, resilience can be taught, and we are sadly not doing enough of that, at least not in our U.S. schools.
Yeah, I don't know what the solution is to that yet, but I absolutely think that that is something that needs to be addressed, because my understanding of it, my lived experience is exactly that. And one of the things that I think is really interesting, a friend and I just had a conversation about this a few days ago, is that for me, a lot of times the solution is simply doing something. It's, you have to find something that you believe will work for you and start pursuing that path. Because my journey, I mean, I identify as being in total recovery right now. I identify as being in recovery from alcoholism. I identify as being in recovery from depression. I identify as a woman in recovery. And it's all because I tried a million things that didn't work, but eventually enough of the puzzle pieces came together that I found the solution that works for me. And I see a therapist regularly, and she actually has had these conversations with me where she's like, I think your solution is really great. Like, you found what works for you, but you also need to identify that at a certain point, you need to understand that every time you tell yourself, I'm okay if I get 7 hours of sleep and I meditate and I journal and I go to yoga and I go to my recovery meetings and I do this, you're also telling yourself, I'm not going to be okay if I'm not doing these things. And that just flipped something for me, where it's this idea of like, I thought I was pretty rigid around it for a while. And I think that can happen to a lot of people in early recovery. I think we have to go through that phase. Like, you have to be rigid about, this is when I took meds for a long time. I don't necessarily want to get into that conversation, but this is the time that I do this. This is what I do. This is that. And what she has taught me, because I mean, I think that's a lot of what the roles that therapists can do, is this resilience building partner, is she said, you have to start looking at it as this bank account. Like, I'm building up my resilience. So yeah, there's going to be a week where family stuff comes in and I don't get to eat the things I want to eat or sleep the way I want to sleep or do this or do that. And I'm still going to be okay. Getting to that point where your vulnerability point is raised enough that you can kind of weather the storm a little bit more.
Yeah, and it's sometimes you can say like, hey, I'm creator of Mental Health Mugs. I have this following. I have expectations for my audience. I got to meet all these orders. I got to create new content. If I don't, I'll fall back behind. That can add a lot of stress to itself. And the whole thing is, we create these things for better mental health, to reach out to people. But in the end, sometimes we can be our own worst enemy. Success can be our enemy. Do you ever feel like that?
Yeah, I had, when I first got diagnosed with depression, I was in my sophomore year of college, and it was my primary care physician that I went to for help at first. And he said something really interesting, because we were trying to figure out if I was going to go back to school or not, if I was going to finish the semester, if I was going to try to withdraw. And he asked me right then to try to make the decision. He said, are you afraid of failure or are you afraid of success? And I'd never thought of that before, just this thing where you can have fear around success just as much as you can have fear around failure. And I think that a lot of that can come into this, I don't know, like, I have some friends who will talk about this, where we talk about this, where we can get into these roles as these identified patients, right? Where a lot of our lives revolve around, this is how things work. And it's like, I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of rambling now. But just this idea that I think that what really matters is just embracing that up and down, right? Like, there have been times where this business has been really, really successful. And there have been times where I've thought, there is no way that I'm going to be able to pull this off. And there have been times in life where I've thought everything is going my way. And there have been times where I think, I am not cut out to live on this planet. And it's just that ebb and that flow and all of those different things. And it's kind of the resilience piece to me is learning how to ride that wave. And then eventually the hope, at least in my perspective, is that sometimes it evens out a little bit more. So instead of going all the way up here and then all the way down here, you're kind of more right in the middle. But just being able to take what comes on a daily basis.
Yeah, and I definitely have learned a lot of resilience myself. And sometimes I have to remind myself that, because there were times not too long ago, just a few years ago, where I would just start things and then quit them the next week. Left and right, left and right. I was bad with relationships, personal, romantic, didn't think I was worthy of love. And I've come so far since then. And like I said, I don't always realize it. It really just came from just doing, like you said. And it was doing from just a little bit more than the last day. And when you do that, it's like when I go out for walks, I say to myself, oh, I'm just going to go around the block. I end up going for a mile. And it's just that's just small little tiny ways of just extending ourselves and pushing ourselves further to the point where it's, wow, I was so scared of doing that at one point, and now it's just like a daily thing. So it can be taught. And sometimes I have to stress this to people. It is not easy. It is very hard. It takes a lot of time, especially when you come from a place of severe trauma where you don't have anyone that loves you. You're lonely. You have all these things going on, physical and mental. Different people, it takes different time, but that's okay. But we all have ways and skills that we can learn to get that resilience back. It may not be the life that we imagine as kids. I certainly didn't imagine this when I was a kid. I didn't imagine Facebook. Right. But here we are. We're resilient. We're having a good time here. Before I get on to my next question, I want to make sure we catch up on comments, because we got some cool ones here. Michelle wants to know, do you offer mugs that are non-breakable? I have a lot of friends and clients who self-harm, and I don't need them self-harming with an awesome mug. Have you got any comments about that before?
I actually have. There's been that comment come up in treatment centers, because it's a lot of treatment centers will offer graduation gifts, and the mugs are so perfectly suited to that, because you can build a routine around it when you get out of treatment. It can be, a lot of times you leave a treatment facility with a prescription to write a gratitude list on a daily basis, to do this, to do that. And the mug can be the habit trigger. But some of them have wanted that same thing for use while they're still there. They've looked for something plastic. So I do have metal tumblers that are completely, they're metal, so they're not ceramic like this. But yeah, I mean, I think that there's definitely room for expansion in the future. I think we'll get into water bottles and we'll get into all of those different things. The entire journey with mental health mugs has been a progress, not perfection thing. But I do want to give credit to pointing that out, because just to have that level of awareness of things like, hey, how can I be compassionate for the people in my life who are suffering and try to think of gifts that are suited to them, I think is wonderful.
Great. And a question from me, do you ever get people emailing you and messaging you saying like, oh, this specific language you have on a mug or product is stigmatizing or is not the right language? Have you ever come across any of that?
I think only once so far. It really hasn't been an issue. And the way that it's just been explained is a lot of the mugs end up coming from requests. So I honor a lot of the requests. So I just pretty frankly say that my entire stance around mental health is based on empowerment. So I want people to pursue the solutions that work for them the same way I want you to pursue the solutions that work for you. If it was not the right mug for you, I'm sorry, but it was the right mug for someone else. So I hope you can find the one that's right for you. And if there was an actual, like, if there was one where someone pointed out, like, hey, just so you know, this is something that was traumatizing, or just so you know, like, if it was more than an opinion or there was actually things behind it, I would definitely look into it more. But fortunately, so far, that hasn't happened. I'm actually starting to collaborate with mental health professionals in the development of the mugs to make sure that things like that don't happen, because I am expanding into conditions that I don't know a lot about. I know about the conditions that I've struggled with, and I know a little bit about some of the other ones, but I want to make sure that I'm not saying things that are insensitive.
Yeah, you definitely don't come across as the kind of person that would just say, well, that's none of my business. So, as you know, I wear all black all the time. Here's my request for a mug. I want a mug that says, black is the new lime green.
It'd be pretty popular, I think.
There we go. Let's get to some more comments. I'm glad you asked that, Michelle. Thank you again for all the supportive comments, Shirley. speaking up about depression. Yeah, that's what we do. She also says, yes, I do understand. I struggle with depression. Take the Mask Off was birthed out of my depression. I love the work you guys are doing. Both of you are awesome. If you have any work you want to share, Shirley, in the comments, feel free. It sounds like you got a lot of good stuff going on there. Have you ever thought about it as a mask that you have to take off, either your depression or your alcoholism?
When I was in treatment, we did a ton of work around masks. We actually made masks that we hid behind. And I'm a really big fan of the work of Martha Beck. She has a column in Oprah's magazine. She's known as like this life coach extraordinaire, and she writes these magical, magical books that I highly recommend to everybody. And I remember when I was reading, and one of her books was just about all these masks and just identifying when you're living in that. Because I think I slip into the people-pleasing mask sometimes. I think I slip into the whatever mask it is. But a lot of it for me was this idea that I didn't necessarily have a sense of identity. I was just whoever I needed to be in the circumstance I was in. And I think a lot of it for me was coming, it was around low self-esteem. It was around low self-worth. It was around all of those different things. And the solution that's works best for me is actually a saying from recovery rooms where it says, if you want to build self-esteem, do esteemable deeds.
Oh, wait, go further into that. That's intriguing. I never heard that.
So if you want to build self-esteem, do esteemable deeds. So a lot of times, I mean, this is especially relevant with people who are in the early days of substance abuse recovery. We hate ourselves. We think that we are the worst pieces of garbage to ever walk the earth because we've hurt people, we've hurt ourselves, we've done all of these different things. But if you stay trapped in that identity of, oh my God, I'm so awful, I've done these terrible things, I've done this, I've done that, I'm scum, what are your chances of ever getting better? But if you can turn your story into a force for good, if you can say, I did these things, and if I had the chance to do them over, I would do things differently. But here's how I've made amends for it. Here's how I've reached my hand out to somebody else who's still suffering. Like what you do on a daily basis. I have to imagine that this journey has built self-esteem for you because you're doing esteemable deeds. You're going out and you're making a difference in this world. And it's this whole changing your life by being of service. And I think, I keep harping on this empowerment thing, but I think that it is so, so important for us to find that kind of work, the esteemable deeds that actually resonate with us. So I have friends, and a lot of this for me comes down to the introversion, extroversion, ambivert kind of thing. But I have friends where the greatest esteemable deeds they can do is they're able to be on the phone 9 hours a day. They're able to host dinner parties. They're able to do all these really social things that fill people up and help them feel less alone and all those different things. I'm not particularly like that. I tend towards a lot of writing for my advocacy work because that fills me and that is more sustainable for me than something that depletes me. So it's really, it really comes down to like this, find what works for you and then double down on it. Find the path that works for you and build your self-esteem that way. Because I'm guessing that you can probably relate to this, and probably anybody who would tune into this would relate to this. But so much of my suffering was around this idea of the person I should be. I should be this extroverted, fun, perky, all of these. Actually, realistically, the person that alcohol made me, I should be all of those things. I'm not. I am who I am. And I've gotten to a place where most days, not all the time, but most days I'm comfortable with that. So I don't know. That's the angle that I always pursue around that. Like build self-esteem by doing esteemable deeds, but make sure they're esteemable deeds that are actually related to the person you are rather than the person you think you should be.
Yeah, my therapist would always say, don't should yourself.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think for me at this point, as people come in and out of my life, it's more about doing good deeds and not letting people who are either ungrateful or try to bring me down, either just through their own struggles or whatever, just letting that go. People will come in and out of my life. Someone who might have been a good friend at one point may not be so later on down the road. And it's been a hard thing to navigate, especially as I'm in my 30s now. And I look back on, especially I've been on Facebook since 2008. People come and go. That's just been a really hard thing. Can you empathize with that?
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of my early insecurities felt like I didn't know how to stemmed from feeling like I didn't know how to connect with other human beings. So I've carried a lot of guilt and shame around this idea that either I'm not likable or I'm not capable or all of these different things. And so like I don't really have a lot of like relationships that I've maintained with people that I grew up with, mostly because I wasn't actually capable of forming a relationship at that time. So I went through this period. I don't know, it was a few years back now. I remember I probably sounded like a broken record in some of the meetings I would go to, where I would talk about just this feeling of like, oh my God, all these people are doing all of these cool things. Why don't I have those relationships? Why don't I have those different things? And it fell into that. I was shoulding myself, like your therapist would say I shouldn't do. So yeah, I mean, I don't know that that's exactly answering the question that you asked, but just can I relate to that sense of overcoming the insecurity around relationships and having to find a stride that works for me? Yes. Yes, I can relate to that.
Well, awesome. And let's get some more comments, compliments. Heather, who's a frequent viewer, says, good description of the addiction. The substance can be anything, and it is about how it makes us feel or not feel numb out. And our challenge and life opportunity is to learn a healthy way to manifest good feelings. What do you think of that word manifest?
I'm on board with manifesting. I can't say that I have a manifestation practice. It's something I'd be interested in learning more about. What about you?
You know, I go back and forth, and for me, it's great to have intentions, but it's also great to have a plan. And I think when you have both, you're set up for success.
I dig that. One of my closest friends, she talks about the importance of living in alignment. And I think that's the word that resonates with me the most around these kind of things. Like what I've learned in my life, and it'll change obviously over time, I'll learn more, but when I'm living in alignment, life doesn't feel quite so hard. It's about that finding the path that fits you, where it doesn't feel like I'm like elbowing my way through life, which is what I felt for so long. So I think that's a really interesting part of it for me. And that's, I know there was, we were talking about Martha Beck earlier. That's one of her big things, like finding that it doesn't necessarily have to be the flow state, but work on yourself first, work on how you feel, work on how you exist in this world, and the paths will open.
Yeah, and I love that word flow. And I've had to learn is that no one ever has the flow 24/7, 365. That life just has too many curveballs, but it's a matter of, like you said, resilience. You get knocked down, you get back up, and it helps immensely when you have people around you who get it as well and are not trying to bring you down.
Exactly.
I would love for you to leave some resources, some of the stuff we've talked about, Martha Beck and other things, in the comments when you have a chance. So more from Heather again, creating new structures for a new life is necessary. Thanks for talking about the next step of resilience, which is more flexibility and vulnerability. Baby steps are important, and fear of failure. I appreciate, Heather, you always have the best comments and the most articulate and well-rounded. There's your compliment. Here we go. This was on time today. Yes, I'm glad it came for you at the right time today, Shirley. Tabitha says, Rudy, I showcased your work here with the Mighty to LA County Department of Mental Health. On Tuesday, I did a presentation on social media and mental health and how people are finding community. Great job. Keep up these awesome interviews and pushing positive content into the ether. I would love for you to share more about that. Message me, Tabitha.
Awesome.
Yes, I like that. Heather, easy and hard. Sometimes the hard part is taking the first step, but then we let the path be easy. Easy does do it. We can let ourselves show up and be enough. Yay, one size does not fit all. Mugs for everyone. I'm down with that. And feel free to ask questions to me or especially Keely, who's my guest, Keely Carney, owner of Mental Health Mugs. You're watching No Restraints with Rudy Caceres, Fridays, 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. How about using the mental health for making an income? And I'll get to that after we're done with the question, more comments. Hey, Rudy, I once recommended a Martha Beck book to you, Finding Your Way in a Wild New World. I remember that. Oh, my. I remember that. I remember it leading me to other books as well, so I need to dig that up. I give it back to you, I hope. Angela Birdsong says, esteemable deeds, using and applying that term today, and I will talk to you soon, Angela. Tabitha, very inspiring. I have learned that, also building self-esteem. Joanna says, awesome way to say it. Hopefully that was about everything we said. And finally, Maurice says, bonjour, Malise. How are you? Ever been to France, Keely?
I went to Paris to celebrate my 5 years sober.
Awesome.
My 5 year sober trip. It was awesome.
I need to go there. So, mentioned money. Obviously, you run a business. How hard is it to run a business that has to do with mental health? Not only how it affects your own mental health, but you're dealing a lot of people with mental health issues, people who don't always have a lot of income. So for whether you're selling mugs or bracelets, books, t-shirts, being a public speaker, it's very, very hard to make any kind of income as a mental health advocate. So how do you navigate that?
It's the story, the instance that came to mind as soon as this question came up and as soon as you started talking about it was the Wear Your Label company. Are you familiar with them? They made those t-shirts with some mental health sayings on them.
Yes, I'm actually a former brand ambassador of Wear Your Label. I have a couple t-shirts by them.
That's awesome. I think that they do the best job of just being upfront about the fact that an entrepreneurial path can be great for someone who struggles with their mental health. And it can also be incredibly taxing. Like that wave that I was talking about earlier, starting this business has given me incredibly huge waves up and down. Because realistically, one of the reasons I started this and one of the reasons I was drawn to working for myself was to be able to have some flexibility in my schedule. It takes me a lot of time on a daily basis to do the things I need to do to stay well, right? So those things I listed earlier, the meditation, the yoga, the meetings, the community, all of those different things. And my experience had been that sometimes when I was working different jobs, like a 9 to 5 or whatever, I wasn't fitting in all of those things. And it needed to be my priority. So I was trying to work out different ways to be able to have it all. I will be 100% upfront with you and say that I don't have any of it figured out yet. It is day by day trying to figure it out. But I think that sometimes that is the piece to focus on, the identifying what's the actual lifestyle that you want and what is important to you, right? So maybe when I switched to working in a treatment center, I worked afternoons for a while, and I had my morning to go do the things I needed to do, and it actually worked really well. So kind of starting to look at things differently, like, okay, so we're in a situation where it's important for us to earn a living, and then kind of looking at what are my actual options for doing that and finding the path that works for you. I'm actually in the process of trying to figure out how to grow mental health mugs to be able to offer some of those flexible jobs to people who need that. I'm not anywhere close to it yet. It's all a work in progress, but this idea of build self-esteem by doing esteemable deeds. I recognize the challenges of trying to build a career and do all these different things when you're dealing with the ups and downs of mental health and having to do the things that you need to do to stay well, which take time. So I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of it is starting to think out of the box. What's been your experience?
Well, one thing I've learned and want to stress to everyone watching this is that there's no such thing as guaranteed sustainable income when it comes to being a mental health advocate. I've interviewed people, I've seen people come and go. They've had all kinds of different enterprises, and it's kind of sad because it's oftentimes through no fault of their own, whether it be the economy, whether it be changing of taste and trends in society, or whether it's outside trauma that was no fault of their own. People tend to drop out, and it's a sad thing. And that's why I want to stress is that you may have success at one point, you or anyone else with your product, with your speaking ability, and it could change. And so but one day at a time, always trying to innovate, always trying to think one step at a time. Because, I mean, we have Wear Your Label, and now there's all kinds of other products and t-shirt companies that have their own mental health messages on them. So Wear Your Label doesn't have that market squared off anymore. It's not their niche. So that's the thing. There might be a company tomorrow that has similar mental health mugs, just change it up a little bit so you don't see them. And there you go. That's half of your income potentially. So it's constantly finding new ways to innovate and to diversify. Whether it be, if you're a public speaker, also have a physical product. If you're selling a physical product, maybe do online courses as well. So those are some ideas. I would love to do an entire Facebook Live with either anyone about how to find different ways to have sustainable income, because there's no one way. You may think it is. I'm talking to everyone out there. You may have the $1 million product, but it will not last.
Yeah.
That's my soapbox rant for today. So let's go back to the mugs. You have Mental Health Advocate. The one you have online is the white one with the black writing. Mm-hmm. You also have Mental Health Coffee Break. I like this one because I don't drink coffee. This is actually kava tea. So for me, it means that I'm not having coffee, actually. The coffee is crossed out. I'm having tea. And that's the important thing. Just because you're not a coffee drinker does not mean you cannot purchase your mental health mugs, because they are multifaceted, multi-purpose mugs, drinking accessories, I like to call them, drinking vessels, beverage vessels. There we go. Mm-hmm. Mental health beverage vessels. Talk about the other mugs you have. What are your favorites? What has been the evolution, and where are you going? Where are you going as far as different ideas? You talked about different materials and what have you. So tell us all about that.
It's interesting. Early on, a lot of the ones that did well were kind of generic sayings. So it was the progress, not perfection. It was these affirmation type sayings. And then a few months ago, actually, I guess it was longer than that now, The Mighty did a video about us, and I got in front of a much more solid mental health crowd. And what really took off was these condition mugs. So the mugs that say, anxiety is a liar, stronger than my eating disorder, depression warrior, these ones that are really dedicated to starting that conversation about the specific condition and turning it into that whole empowering piece that we talked about saying, I can have this mug that starts a conversation. I remember one of my favorite comments about it was this woman on Instagram had talked about, just imagine going into a Starbucks and the person, and you're in the midst of your struggle. She personally had struggled with an eating disorder. She's like, and I'm in the midst of all of this terrible everything related to my eating disorder. And the woman in front of me is holding a mug that says, my eating disorder is a liar. That is a conversation starter. That's a pretty serious thing to happen. So I've seen that evolution happen. A lot of the future is really just figuring out, what people want. And for me, most of it comes down to what will actually help, right? So I've never seen these as mugs. They're not. They're a conversation starter. They're a habit trigger. They're an encouragement. And that's why all of this community piece is important, because I don't know that everybody thinks about it this way, but pretty much every single time I pick up my mug, I'm thinking about oh wow, who else is using one of these at that same time? And then I send them some good vibes. Just who is using this, and it's just the way we're all connected.
I agree. I mean, I can't say enough good things about what it's like to have physical products that are conversation starters, that talk about mental health. You know me, I could talk about mental health left and right. You look at my Facebook, you look at my Instagram. It's not about what I'm wearing or what I'm doing. Actually, it is about what I'm wearing most days, but it always has a mental health message. I have my sweatpants and coffee T-shirt. I have mental health books that are just filled with in my library. My bookcase is just filled with mental health books, biographies. I can't get enough of it. So whenever I have a chance to show that physically, tangibly, it's a great thing. I mean, that's me personally. If you have something mental health related, it can be a parachute. I will buy that thing, and you'll be on this show because that's how I'm going to get it free. So let's get to some more comments before we start wrapping up. Ashley Christoph, who we both know and love, says, I use my mental health mug every workday.
Oh, that's so exciting.
So, and she was the one who put together the video, correct? For the Mighty?
Put together the video, which was awesome. I think the one that she uses is be the person your dog thinks you are.
That is awesome. I have seen that. I will link to that below. That is one of your finer pieces, Ashley. She's great. I work with her too, and I do my Facebook Lives. Tabitha says, peers and people with mental health issues require flexibility. New work models are needed so everyone can be successful and supported. I hear that from a lot of people who have a lot to offer the world, but can't necessarily work a full-time schedule, either due to mental, physical, or just issues, period. And they're not able to find jobs that are part-time or that are flexible, that offer mental health days, or at least enough for their particular needs or their accessibility needs. So there's a lot of work to be done with that. So I like that you're talking about that with your own business as well. And I'd love to hear more when you have something to announce.
Yes, definitely.
So Tabitha again says, take all the free social media training online. So much free training and webinars online. No, because then I can't charge for it, Tabitha. No, comment taken off the screen. I'm just kidding. Yes, and Ashley says, correct. I appreciate you for watching. Let's see if we have any more comments. Okay, Tabitha, one more again. You and Heather are always the MVPs. OMG, me too. I think I'm about to go back to toxic work life, but I'm thinking about approaching it in a hard reduction way, like just somehow do it less and replace things I'm getting out of it each time with healthier things. Ugh, harm reduction model for work-life balance and high maintenance mental health life. And that brings me to my last question before we get into final words. Keely Carney, if there ever comes a time where mental health mugs, or even just being online mental health advocate, gets to be all too much, what then? Some people I talk to, that's all they have. And sadly, suicide is something that does happen for people who get burnt out or feel like they've lost meaning in life as giving someone to the role as a mental health advocate. If that were to ever go away, and that's a big if, what would become of Keely Carney?
I actually, it's funny. Some days, the entrepreneurial path, where I'm working so many hours and so many things, some days I just dream of going back to a job in marketing. So I think that I would do that.
Okay, and we're going to stay connected though. So whatever you end up getting involved with, please just know that no matter where you go in life, you're still very much a part of the mental health family. And so I like to say that anyone can be a mental health advocate. You don't need to have an online presence. You don't need to have a website or mugs, as cool as they are. Anyone can be a mental health advocate. So I hope that no matter where you end up in life, that you still are a champion for mental health awareness and for mental health civil rights.
Well, I think that's so important too. Like, I really enjoy writing. So I read about writing and I learn about writing and all those different things. And a lot of times the advice that comes out of it is early on, don't ask your hobby to support you, right? So if you want to be a mental health advocate from the beginning, you can still, and you already have a job and it's not hurting you and it's not causing you it's not contributing to the decline of your mental health or anything like that. Start small. That's exactly what I did. I started the mental health advocacy path while I was working in a different field and while I was doing those different things. And then as it built up, I started to switch over. I think sometimes this idea that it's all or nothing hurts us a lot, right? So whatever job, I mean, let's hope that this stays my job forever. Let's hope that this is the career path that I stay on. But if something changes, I'll never stop writing about mental health. I'll never stop doing things like this. But it's just maybe the part that needs to change is the earning the living from it. Or maybe the part that needs to change is doing it part-time instead of full-time, or all those different things. Like exactly what you were talking about earlier. There are so many options available to all of us. And I think a lot of times we see people who seem to have it all figured out, or they they're able to, earn their living doing this or that. And it's like, that doesn't have to be the ideal. Whatever works for you is what works for you.
I couldn't agree more. And I know I said I had a last question, but I didn't mean the audience didn't have a last question. And that question is there one for suicidal ideation?
I do not have one for suicidal ideation yet, but we could make that happen.
There we go. There we go. Making decisions live. That's what happens when you watch No Restraints with Rudy Caceres. You get cool inside information like this and stuff you won't get anywhere else. I don't know why I keep doing this, but thank you, Keely Carney. I appreciate that. Any last final words of wisdom? Talk about the website, talk about the social media, anything else you have going on. The floor is yours. I'll let you take over the screen.
Just check out everything Mental Health Mugs related. It's mentalhealthmugs.com. The Instagram handle is Mental Health Mugs. I do tend to write about my experience living in recovery, and there's a section on the website that's Keely's blog, so you can check that out there. And really, the final words are just, do what works for you. We all have this opportunity on a daily basis to try something new. And my entire recovery has hinged on experimenting with things, seeing if this helps, seeing if that helps, cutting out what doesn't, adding more of what does. And a lot of it is finding fulfillment. So, if opening up about your mental health journey is fulfilling to you, that can be a tool in your recovery toolkit, which I think is so, so cool. So just sending good vibes to everybody out there who is doing this work, who is interested in doing this work. And like I said from the very beginning, I really think we have the opportunity to completely eliminate stigma, because we're reaching that. Just like there's a tipping point between, into the mental health crisis, there's a tipping point between a subject that's taboo and a subject that's normalized. And I think we just need to get there. And I think we are getting there.
We are erasing stigma one mug at a time. So I have 2 mugs, and so that's double the stigma reduction. I appreciate you so much, Keely Carney, for hanging out with us. I appreciate all of you, Tabitha, Di, Ashley, Gabriella, Melise, Joanna, Heather, Angela, Aaron, and Shirley. Did I miss anything else? Sally was in the bottom. I appreciate you all. I love it. If you're watching this later on in the week, please still feel free to say hello. If you're from Keely's family and friends, that's cool too. Welcome. This is No Restraints with Rudy Caceres. I do these Fridays at 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. Thank you so much, Keely Carney. And I didn't tell you about this in advance, but we're going to try to time this right, where I say because it's for your own good, and then we'll take a sip from the mug and we'll end it that way. So
okay.
Show some love for Keely Carney. Go check her out. I'll leave all the comments below. Next Friday, I'll see you again for No Restraints with Rudy Caceres, because it's for your own good.
I think we did it.